Katie Radcliffe, 18 years old, lived in Camberley, Surrey County, England. In 1992, she was doing an apprenticeship as a hairdresser at a local beauty salon. In the future, she dreamed of opening her own salon. Her colleagues were like a second family to her. She loved her job, her family, her friends. Katie was in love. She was becoming an adult. She had a life full of colors. In early May, Katie's boyfriend broke up with her. It was her first love. The breakup was tough for her. She only left home to go to work, and after her shift, she stopped seeing her friends. Katie withdrew into herself, spending evenings alone at home. On June 6, 1992, Katie's best friend, Michelle, convinced her to go to a nightclub with her, thinking that it was necessary for her to heal from her emotional pain. Katie stayed at the club until 4 in the morning. At the end of the party, the girls' plans for continuing the night were different, and Katie went home alone. Katie Radcliffe did not return home. Four teenagers set up a tent in the backyard of one of their homes. The boys imagined that in the future, they would definitely camp in distant canyons and dense forests. But for now, their parents didn't allow them to do it anywhere other than in the backyard. The boys woke up early in the morning because it started pouring rain and their temporary shelter was not waterproof. Shivering, they went into a friend's house and had breakfast. At around 8 a.m., they went for a walk. The boys saw a naked, mutilated body lying along the concrete wall of a cemetery behind a parked car. There was a lot of blood around. This sight would haunt each of them for the rest of their lives. The police arrived at the crime scene. It was determined that the body had been dragged several meters and then thrown against the cemetery wall. Most likely, the victim had initially been brought there by car. The crime scene was cordoned off and the body was taken to the morgue. On the same day, it was established that the victim was Katie Radcliffe. She had documents with her. The body was found on a street in the town of Farnborough, 6 kilometers from the club where she was last seen. Farnborough was in the opposite direction from the girl's home. Katie had been stabbed 27 times. The blade of the knife was 17 centimeters long. Some of the wounds were through and through. Katie was not killed immediately. Some cuts were superficial, probably intended to inflict pain on the victim. A large number of injuries were inflicted after her death. The unknown assailant did not want to stop. There were no signs of sexual assault. One piece of jewelry was taken from Katie, inexpensive costume jewelry, most likely taken from her body as a trophy. Clive Discall, the senior inspector working on the case, compared the killer in terms of injuries inflicted and the level of cruelty to Jack the Ripper, characterizing the killer as exceptionally predatory. The first criminal profile was created by English surgeon Thomas Bond back in 1888. Based on the information provided to him by the investigation, he described the personality of Jack the Ripper. There were quite a few similarities between this murder and Jack the Ripper's work. It was decided to involve a profiler. The expert created a psychological profile of the presumed perpetrator, and there were quite a few matches with Thomas Bond's work. The killer had to be a physically strong person, appearing to others as quiet and harmless. He had an average income and a physically demanding job. His age was estimated to be 30 to 35 years old. The unknown individual periodically experienced episodes of erotic mania. The nature of the injuries inflicted suggested that the man might be prone to satyriasis. Satyriasis is a male neurotic condition of uncontrolled, excessive sexual desire. It was likely that the impulse to kill developed due to a desire for revenge. Perhaps there were problems with erection, which fueled even greater hatred towards women, or normal sexual intercourse did not bring satisfaction. He was inclined towards perversions and sexual deviance. Despite the absence of sexual contact, as determined by the expert, the crime had a sexual motive. The police focused on the nightclub, or more precisely, on the male patrons of the establishment. At the time, the club in 1992 did not have surveillance cameras. Investigators began their work with interviews. Mainly, they managed to identify the identities of regulars at the club. Determining the entire list of male patrons on that night was impossible. The few club guests who could be interviewed did not arouse suspicion and had alibis. The next day, a former boyfriend of Katie was brought to the police station. The slender young man with a sparse beard sat in the police station, dressed in baggy shorts and a t-shirt. But the detectives interrogating him had every reason to believe that the guy hiding his ugly and savage nature in their interrogation room. The young man didn't fit the psychological profile at all. Moreover, he was the one who initiated their breakup. He was concerned about how hard Katie took the breakup. If anyone was burning with hatred and a desire for revenge, it definitely wasn't him. But there was one suspicious detail. It turned out that the guy was also at the nightclub that night. Of course, he saw his ex-girlfriend. They tried to discreetly keep an eye on each other. Katie left earlier, and he stayed with friends until morning and spent the night at one of their houses. Katie's ex-boyfriend had an alibi. The police then checked for sexual offenders in the region, but it didn't lead to anything. Such cruelty couldn't be contained for long, and the police had no choice but to wait. 2 years passed, and there were no similar attacks in Surry County. Investigators began to think that the brutal killer had moved on, and his bloody trail likely led to other regions. The identity of the killer remained unknown. At that time, as before, investigators envisioned the killer as a large, strong middle-aged man consumed by hatred towards women. But new facts shattered this profile. The brutal murder of Katie was committed by a local schoolgirl. Exactly 2 years after Katie's murder, on June 7, 1994, at Collingwood College in Surrey, and Marie Clifford entered the restroom with another schoolgirl. And Marie was standing by the sink, looking in the mirror, when her classmate, Sharon Carr, for no apparent reason, forcefully stabbed her in the back, puncturing her lung. And Marie saw a smile in Sharon's reflection. Her classmate's eyes were filled with joy. Sharon grabbed Marie and threw her onto the cold tile floor. She had so much strength, her hands seemed like they were made of iron. Sharon stood over Marie, grinning and switching the knife from one hand to the other. At that moment, a group of girls entered the restroom. They caught Sharon at the crime scene and called an ambulance and the police. And Marie survived the attack, although it left her with psychological and physical trauma. Surprisingly, no one else was hurt that day because Sharon was raging with fury. After her arrest, Sharon Carr was sent to a medical center. She screamed, struggled, spat, and kicked. She was determined to finish what she started. She appeared wild. She wasn't allowed to finish, and she couldn't accept it. From there, Sharon was sent to a juvenile correctional facility. Sharon Louise Carr was born in Belize on December 21, 1979. Belize is a small country in Central America that was under British rule until 1981 and was known as British Honduras. The family she was born into was very poor, like many families in the area. She was one of 4 children by 3 different fathers. So, Sharon was raised, if you can call it that, by her mother and stepfather. Her mother's partner drank every day. He was a violent alcoholic who, when heavily intoxicated, would beat his partner and the children. For Sharon, childhood became a struggle for survival. Her childhood was a constant danger in the ghetto and endless pain and abuse at home. Sharon's mother, Molly, in between her partner's beatings, administered cruel punishments to her children. Later, Sharon's mother left her alcoholic partner and met George Carr, a Royal Army Medical Corps serviceman serving in Belize. When Sharon was 7, their entire family moved to Surry County. Sharon now attended a local school and received a good education. At first, her teachers described her as a polite and helpful student. Sharon made friends among her classmates. She started attending extracurricular basketball classes. People said she was a sociable and compassionate girl, but within a year, Sharon's behavior deteriorated significantly. She became irritable, rude, and drew attention with profanity and hostile actions. In 1990, the head teacher of Cardwell's Junior School in Camberley contacted social services regarding Sharon's behavior. They even placed her in foster care. However, she wanted to return to her family, and she came back home after just a month. Sharon's childhood was a survival ordeal. She witnessed her enraged mother, in a fit of fury, overturn a large pot of boiling broth onto her partner. The man writhed in pain on the kitchen floor, and Sharon stood above him, looking down. Violence became a norm for the child. The injured man was hospitalized with burns, and the mother was charged with assault and received a suspended prison sentence. When Sharon entered secondary school, her mother had a new partner. No one tried to remove Sharon from the family anymore. In the past, the girl had been afraid of everyone around her. Now, they were afraid of her. Schoolmates avoided her in terror, and she liked it. She had no more friends at school. She considered fear the highest form of respect. Sharon found friends who matched her. They weren't from her school. They were older than her and used drugs. Together with her friends, who were also her accomplices, she started stealing. Sharon, it seemed, feared nothing and no one except her own mother. And it wasn't just because she was merciless and cruel. She carried secret knowledge with her. Sharon believed that her mother possessed a hidden, powerful force. She was a follower of the voodoo religion but also practiced hoodoo, a North African form of witchcraft and religious cult. Sharon had witnessed bloody animal sacrifices multiple times. Watching her mother, the girl started sacrificing animals herself. With a regularity of no less than once a week, neighborhood pets began to disappear. Initially, by masking her sadistic inclinations with rituals, Sharon quite soon realized that torturing animals brought her pleasure. Let's go back to 1994. Sharon Carr was sentenced to 2 years in prison for assaulting Anne Marie Clifford. Sharon was in prison, and even within the prison system, she proved to be extremely difficult to handle. She attacked other inmates and staff several times, leading to multiple transfers between prisons. In September 1995, she was transferred to the Juvenile Correctional Facility Bridewell Hall. Soon after her transfer, staff found that Sharon Carr was disclosing things to her cellmates that were previously unknown about her. Probably to make an impression. Sharon told the inmates that she had committed murder. Bridewell Hall staff alerted the police. Everyone in the prison knew that Sharon wrote something in a thick notebook every evening. The notes made in prison, as well as diaries seized from her home, were studied by the police. The diaries from home contained descriptions of the sexual excitement she experienced when killing Katie Ratcliffe. One chilling entry read, "I wish I could kill you again. I promise I would make you suffer even more. Your screams still excite me. Next time, it will last much longer." Sharon also wrote, "I swear, I was born a killer. Killing is excitement for me, and it elevates me so high that I never want to come down. Every night, I see the devil in my dreams, and sometimes I see him in the mirror. I understand that the devil is me." The press picked up this revelation from the killer, and soon Sharon Carr became known as the daughter of the devil. In the following years, Sharon attempted to relive that fateful night of June 7, 1992. She wanted to recreate her sensations so strongly that on the anniversary of her first murder, she attacked another girl with a knife. Later, in her prison notebook, she didn't describe what was happening to her daily, as many thought. Every day, for several years already, she wrote down her pleasant sensations from killing. She considered what she did to the girl the best moment of her life. Sharon suffered only from one thing, a thirst for blood. Sharon Carr is yet another vivid example of homicidomania, an irresistible, compulsive attraction to violence and murder. In fact, this is the most harmless entry made by Sharon Carr. Her thoughts were so dark that the police couldn't disclose them to the media. On June 7th, in her diary, it was written, "Respect for Katie Ratcliffe today, for years." Dr. Elizabeth Yardley, a criminologist, said, "A killer's diaries are a way to relive the murder. It's a desire to immortalize them in memory. To be able to go back and experience that moment when they felt all-powerful. This way, they preserve that moment. They don't want to forget it. Not a single detail. That's why we see such lengthy excerpts written about the most horrific acts of violence." Sharon wants to derive pleasure from it even after several years, and, of course, she would do it again because, for her, it's the best thing that ever happened. Sharon was interrogated by the police, and unexpectedly, she readily confessed to the murder of Katie Ratcliffe in the summer of 1992. She had 3 versions of the events. She claimed that she was out joyriding with 2 acquaintances, guys, in a car that night, and they saw Katie all alone. Katie thought they would give her a ride home and got into the car. According to one version, realizing that the car was heading in the opposite direction, Katie jumped out of it. Sharon also jumped out while the car was moving and chased her, knocked her to the ground, and started her bloody rampage. The car, in the meantime, continued driving as if nothing happened. According to the second version, the acquaintances raped her in the car and then dumped her on the roadside. Sharon jumped out of the car to continue tormenting Katie, but Katie hadn't had sexual intercourse that night. According to the third version, Sharon spotted Katie and said she wanted both of them to be taken to a secluded place. At Sharon's request, she and the girl were dropped off near a cemetery on the road. Katie was still alive and unharmed. The car disappeared around the corner. Katie was left in the woods with Sharon, which was probably the most unexpected turn of events she could have found herself in these circumstances. Nighttime, 2 strangers, a car, and a girl with them. And now Sharon stands next to her. But she turned out to be the predator, physically developed beyond her years, an incredibly strong girl holding a knife in her hand. However, the guys Sharon mentioned had alibis for that night, so the police had no concrete evidence of Sharon and Katie being together or any possible accomplices for Sharon. But the detectives had no doubts about what happened next. It all boiled down to one thing: Sharon was ready to talk endlessly about her attack. She described in detail every knife strike with relish. The interrogation lasted for several days and, in total, lasted for 27 hours. 27 hours of bloody details. These were detailed descriptions of the torture and torment of the girl. Despite some inconsistencies in how Katie ended up where she was found, based on Sharon's statements, the police were convinced of her guilt. Sharon graphically depicted the injuries and the bracelet Katie was wearing at the time of her death. Since these details were not made public, they were considered things that only the killer could know. Sharon eagerly agreed to participate in a reconstruction of the murder. During this act, she laughed repeatedly, and a smile never left her face. Detective Sergeant Paul Clemens, who had many conversations with Sharon, said that she seemed to be in another world during those moments. She was filled with delight. The 4-week trial of the daughter of the devil began in the Royal Courts of Justice in Winchester in March 1997, almost 5 years after she killed Katie. It was the letters and subsequent oral testimonies that formed the basis of the prosecution. Sharon had knowledge about the murder that had deliberately been concealed by the police and was not accessible to the public. There were no forensic evidence or direct evidence, but on March 25, 1997, Sharon Carr was unanimously found guilty of the manslaughter of Katie Ratcliffe due to her age and mental instability, and she was sentenced to 14 years in prison. Katie's sister Joanna, her mother Helen, and her father Joseph were in court. Helen told the press, "It's like me and my family are serving the sentence. This monster doesn't care. Not a day goes by when I don't think about what happened. I know there will never be a time when I can just get over it. I will carry my grief to the grave." Soon after the verdict, Sharon was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. This is a psychosis that involves symptoms such as delusional thinking, hallucinations, disorganized thinking, and speech. It indicates a loss of contact with reality. On June 16, 1998, in accordance with mental health law, Sharon was transferred to Broadmoor, a high-security psychiatric hospital in Crowthorne, Berkshire, where a large number of the most dangerous serial killers and maniacs were held. There, 21-year-old Sharon Carr fell in love with another inmate. In June 2001, the lovers planned to get married and even ordered rings for themselves. Sharon chose 24-year-old Robbie Lane as her future husband. The couple had met 2 years ago, naturally in their psychiatric hospital. Since then, they had regular hour-long meetings under supervision, during which they were allowed to kiss and hug. The couple was supposed to get married in the hospital chapel at the end of June. Several other inmate patients who had become close friends of the couple were to participate in the ceremony. This news became known to the media and was immediately highlighted on the front pages. Katie's father commented, "She took my daughter away from me. Katie's murder 9 years ago shattered my family. My wife and I divorced, and now she's allowed to get married, love, and live." But this was not meant to be. Sharon got hold of a newspaper and only then found out what her fiancé had done. When Lane was 17, in a fit of jealousy, he killed his mother. First, he brutally beat her, thinking that she loved his sister more. Then he gouged her eyes out with the handle of a carpet brush. He then bludgeoned her to death. He was sent to Broadmoor in 1996. After reading the article, Sharon limited her communication with her fiancé in every way. She despised him for what he had done to his mother. Sharon loved her mother more than anyone in the world. Sharon remained in Broadmoor until it became a male-only facility. 26 years have passed since Sharon's trial. She still poses a danger to the British public. Despite being sentenced to 14 years, she remains highly unstable. Her behavior is unpredictable, and Sharon is willing to kill without any motive. Currently, Sharon Carr is in a women's prison on the outskirts of Ashford, Middlesex. She is in solitary confinement, and given her unstable mental state, she is likely to remain there for the rest of her life.